Great. So again, welcome to you. And I want to start us off just by sharing a quote from Joanna Macy. So if you'd like, you can close your eyes if that's comfortable, or just gaze at something in your room that feels calming. Just take a couple of breaths. Maybe you want to feel your feet on the floor or give your legs a squeeze. And this is a quote from Joanna Macy, who, as you might know, is the founder of this work. In her book, Widening Circles, where she's speaking about the first time that she accidentally stumbled into facilitating this work. And she says, I learned two things that week: that the pain for the world, which I carried around inside me, was widely and deeply shared, and that something remarkable happened when we expressed it to each other. Instead of miring ourselves in doom and gloom, the opposite had happened. We turned some key that unlocked our vitality. And so that's really what we're here to do today. We're here to unlock our vitality together. So thank you for being here. And why don't we take just a moment, if you want to have a look, as though we were in the room together, looking around the circle, just have a look around the screen and see who's here. Just kind of saying hello with your eyes. Some of you may know each other, some of you may. Probably most of us don't. Just seeing who's here, who's in the room with us today. Nice. And we're actually going to start by getting to know each other a little bit more. So the first thing we're going to do is go into breakout rooms, and you'll be in a breakout room with two other people. And very simple, just quick little introduction. Each person will have 1 minute, and we'd just like you to share your name, where you're joining us from, and what is your favorite way to relax. And as you're sharing what is your favorite way to relax, you may even want to close your eyes and think about it, and give us some detail, So I might say, oh, my favorite way to relax is to take a bath. But maybe instead I might say, oh, I like to turn the lights down. I like to let the water run. I like to put some lavender essential oil. Give us some detail about what it feels like in this place, your favorite way to relax. It may be a place that you enjoy. But yeah, so simple enough. You'll have 1 minute each, and we'll send you prompts on the screen there that say first person shares, now wrap up your share, second person shares. So you can keep an eye out for that. But your name, where you're joining us from, and what's your favorite way to relax. So any questions before we go in? Okay, are we set, Amaya? Okay, here we go. One second. Chance to take an extra breath. Okay, here we go. Welcome back. I got to go into a room. I feel so much more relaxed now. So I should have everybody else popping back here shortly. Nice. Welcome back. Welcome back. So, we're going to move more into introducing the work, but I just want to open it up for maybe one or two comments. If anybody has something that they would like to share about how that first little exercise was, you don't have to, but if anybody has anything just right there on your tongue or on your heart that you'd like to share, the floor is open. Just one or two comments would be great. You can just pop yourself on mute and Sam, go for it.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for that. Just that tool of asking someone to look for their favorite way to relax is really, a beautiful little tool in its own right, because of course then we go through a Rolodeck of really beautiful experiences and we remember that feeling in our body. So thank you for that. I'm really grateful.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam. Thank you. Yeah. So does anybody else want to say anything before we move on?
It's Robin. I wanted to say, I was trying to think of the best words just for what we were talking about in our little group. Feeling containment of the body and embodiment. Being in your body. That's it.
Thank you. It's great. Great. Yeah, we'll try to do more of that, being in our bodies. So yeah. Thanks everybody. And yeah, I realize I haven't said a whole lot about myself yet, so I'm gonna start there. I'm gonna probably share some background information with you for the next 10 minutes or so. Might be a little bit longer than that, depending on what we get through. So do whatever you need to stay engaged. If you need to stretch or mute yourself and make a lot of noise, you're welcome to do that. So my name is Anna Swisher. I grew up in a suburb of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, in the United States. And when I was about 22, 23, I moved to San Francisco, and I was kind of discovering a whole lot about the world. And then around 24, 25, I kind of started having a bit of a crisis of meaning and feeling like, what does it all mean? Why is any of this important? What am I doing with my life? And so I went through a variety of processes, and I ended up finding myself back at graduate school at the California Institute of Integral Studies. Maybe some of you know it. And it was there I was studying something called East-West psychology. It was basically spirituality and psychology, looking at traditions from all over the world and how they make sense of what it means to be human and what is healing and, perspectives on the psyche and indigenous traditions and Eastern traditions and Western traditions. And it was there in that program that I met Joanna Macy. I was lucky enough to have her as a teacher. And when I discovered her work, it changed my life in very tangible ways. And so I kind of started engaging more deeply with the Work That Reconnects. And I was lucky enough to live in the same place as Joanna. So I got to absorb her teaching quite a lot. And it became a really regular part of my life. And I started incorporating it kind of into some of the work that I was already doing with women's groups and mentoring adolescents. And I just found it so helpful and so real and so honest and grounded, actually. And so I kind of kept working with it. And then a handful of years ago, right before I moved to Ireland, so I've been in the west of Ireland now for a bit over 3 years. I decided that I wanted to take the work to another level, and so I stepped into the facilitator development training program. And so I did the official training program to be a facilitator. And since then have been doing, groups for the last year and a half. We've been running online groups, which has been really surprisingly fulfilling and deep. And it's a bit of a testament to me to how adaptable the work is. But before then, of course, we were doing more in-person groups. So I just find this work to be one of the things that keeps me going the most of all the things that I engage with. It keeps me coming back to a source of truth and inspiration, and not feeling alone. So that's a bit about my story with the work. And I just want to give you a bit of a background in terms of Joanna and how the work came to be, before we kind of dive in a bit more. The official training program is called it's called the Spire. Amaya's got the link to it there in the chat if you want to find out more about the training program. So Joanna Macy is now 93 years old. She lives in Berkeley, California, and she is a rather amazing woman. She has a memoir called Widening Circles, if you'd like to find out more about her life. But she, went through a lot of stages of her life. She did a lot of traveling, and she did a lot of studying. She was quite a scholar. She first got really interested in Buddhism, kind of first experientially, and then became went back and studied it on an academic level. And she's also a systems theory scholar, which we'll talk more about. And then she also really through her children, one of her kids was in kind of university age and was studying environmental science, and kind of helped her become aware of the intensity of the destruction that we were facing. And that kind of broke something open in her. She got really involved in nuclear waste activism. And it was during this time when she was working with a lot of other activists and really encountering a lot of her own grief and hopelessness and despair and anger and rage, and working with other activists who were feeling similarly, that all of these feelings of despair, hopelessness, anger, sadness, you name it, those feelings actually were becoming paralyzing, and they were making it hard to keep going. They were making it hard to maintain any sense of hope for the future. So this feeling of when we encounter the truth of the state of our world, it's overwhelming. And so what they decided to do, they said, you know what, let's try something. Let's create a space where we can tell the truth about what we're feeling, about what we're seeing and what we're feeling. And what they found was when they did this, they actually unleashed a huge amount of energy, of creativity, and they felt less alone with it all. So, as in that initial quote that I read when we started, rather than it being this doom and gloom session, it became freeing. It became enlivening, and it helped them remember what they cared about, why they cared, and what they wanted to act on behalf of, how their love for the world. And it gave them a lot of not just energy, but also they were able to find creative solutions. And then when at that point the work became, as it became kind of developed, it became called despair and empowerment work, because those were the two main facets of it, the truth telling about the despair, and then the empowerment that came as a result of that. And then as Joanna evolved in her work and she started getting more involved with deep ecology and deep ecologists around the world, John Seed would be one that had a particular influence on the work. The work started to include more focus on like removing the human centeredness of the work. So taking ourselves out of the center of the equation and turning more to the relationships with the web of life, with the extremely long story of the planet Earth and the rest of the universe. And so the work kind of developed with this additional facet that was really rooted in a lot of deep ecology and Gaia theory and a lot of indigenous traditions. So we'll dive more into all of that as we go on, but that's kind of how the work evolved. And that was about 40 years ago when the work came to be. And since then, it has grown into a massive network. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of facilitators all over the world, and it functions as a network does. It's very self-organizing, and there's a lot of access points, and it's all open source, so it's available to anybody, which is part of the beauty of it. And so that's kind of how the work is developed now. And Joanna is now at a point where she's looking back at her life and at the world, and trying to take in how much of an impact it's had on so many people around the world. So I feel really honored to be here sharing it with you all. Yeah. So why don't we take a breath? Take a little stretch if you like. Stretch the arms up, maybe look around the room, a couple of blinks, maybe take a sip of water. I'm going to do that. Yeah, and so this work is really about, to me, this work is about resilience. It's about tapping our own capacity for resilience, both individually and collectively. And that's why we do it together. So it can be done one-on-one. It can be used, like I use it in my everyday life when I'm struggling, but really it's group work. So we do this together to help us access our own resilience. And so when we look at the world through this lens that the Work That Reconnects uses, we've identified kind of over the years three stories that tell the story of the world that we live in. And just have to click something here. The purpose of these stories is not to say that one is correct, one is true and one is not, because really they're all true in some way. But the purpose of identifying these stories is so that we can then choose as individuals which story we would like to be a part of. And I'm going to share these stories with you now. And this will be the end of talking for the moment. But the first story is called Business as Usual. Business as usual is the story that we hear from the military industrial complexes, from business schools, from most mainstream media, from a lot of politicians, not all of them by any means. But business as usual is the story of the industrial growth society. And the central plot is about economic growth and profit. And the plot line kind of says, we're doing all right. We're doing everything okay as we are. Let's just keep going as we are. Let's, build industries with a small percentage of humans having most of it and a majority of humans giving the labor and not receiving compensation, and that a lot of these consequences, like the destruction of land and indigenous societies and species extinction and dramatic climate collapse, these are kind of temporary side effects. And we don't actually need to change anything about the way that we're doing things. So this is the story of business as usual. And I wonder, might you have any examples that are in your mind, kind of evidence of this story going on? Like what do you see happening in the world that fits into this story? And could you pop an example of that into the chat now? What does business as usual look like? Another way of saying that is, what assumptions might there be about the world that fit into business as usual? I'll just take a minute to do that. Grind culture leading to burnout. Earth is a commodity. Absolutely. The rush to get back to normal, building more pipelines. Yep. Technology will fix our environmental problems. Assumption of infinite natural resources. Absolutely. Focus on individualism, competition. Yes. So these are all brilliant examples of business as usual. Building more airports, products packaged and sold. Yes. Thank you. So the second story we'll move on to here is the story of the Great Unraveling. And the Great Unraveling is a story that we hear from a lot of environmental scientists, from a lot of independent media. And the Great Unraveling is basically the story that the plot line is that the web of life is unraveling, that things are falling apart, and that we are past the point of no return. Yeah. Socially, environmentally, economically, that we're unraveling, and as is the web of life. And I wonder if you might have any examples or evidence of this story, anything that you see happening in the world that is evidence of the great unraveling. You can pop that into the chat as well. Environmental collapse, conflict, violence. There's no point in fighting it. Absolutely. Yeah. Drought, rising food prices, huge reduction in wildlife species, insects. Absolutely. There's a lot of evidence for this story if we look around, right? So the third story that we'll talk about now is the story of the Great Turning. And the Great Turning is a story that we hear from those who acknowledge that the great unraveling is happening, but who are not willing to let it have the last say. So the Great Turning is a story about a shift from the industrial growth society to a life-sustaining society. The Great Turning is a story about the creativity of humans and about the capacity for a lot of small changes to have a big impact, for humans to learn how to work together, for things to turn around, for us to create a better, a life-sustaining society for the future generations. And the Work That Reconnects exists to support the Great Turning. So the Great Turning is really about change. It's about new ways of doing things. It's also about returning to the wisdom of sustainable, earth-based indigenous cultures to whom this way of living is actually not new, right? So the Great Turning is why we're here, is to say, this is why the Work That Reconnects exists anyway, to say, yes, I believe in the Great Turning and I want to take part in it. So those are the three stories. And we're going to take just a moment now to go into breakout rooms. And we're just going to share. You don't have to have your thoughts together in any sort of a way, but I'm just going to ask you to share, what is all this making you think about? How is this landing in you? What does it have you thinking or feeling or wondering? Yeah. And you'll have 2 minutes each. So we'll just let you know when each 2 minutes is up, and you can switch to the next person. Okay. Any questions before we go in? Yeah. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right. Should have everybody coming back in another moment. Feel free to take a moment to stretch. Take a big breath. You may even want to stand up and shake a little bit. Feel your feet on the floor. I'm a big fan of shaking. We take shake breaks and pretty much everything I've welcome back, everybody. We're just taking a moment to take a breath, take a stretch, take a shake, whatever feels good. Yeah. Take a sip of water. And then we've just got one more piece to cover before we take a short break and get into all of our practices. And that is, how do we do the work that reconnects? What is the model that we follow, and what's it all about?
That's what I like.
So I'm going to share that with you now. Where do I want to start? I guess I'll start by saying that, as I kind of said before, this was a process of development of this model. And it's now probably been as it is, I'm not actually 100% sure, but I'd say probably for a good 20 or 30 years. And the model that we use for the work is a spiral. And that basically indicates that it's never done. In the course of, a workshop, we would move through the spiral at least once, depending on how long it was. In a 2-hour workshop, we probably moved through it once. There are some practices that move through the entire spiral themselves. But in the course of any given day or life experience, we're going to be finding ourselves at different points of the spiral at different times. And so it can also be a helpful model for just helping us orient to how we are in our life processes on any given day. So I'm going to show you my really high-tech graphic here of the spiral. So you may want to click on speaker view if you haven't yet. But this is what the spiral looks like. You can find images for it, beautiful painted images of it all over the internet, but this is my handwriting. So where we start in the spiral is up here at the top in gratitude. It's the first stage of the spiral. And gratitude, we start in gratitude for a lot of reasons. As you may have noticed in our first practice where we talked about what's our favorite way of relaxing, gratitude actually helps us. It helps soothe our nervous system. It helps us to feel safe. It helps us to feel open and grounded. It also helps us to connect to what it is that really matters. It helps us to connect to what resources we already have in our life that are life-giving and life-affirming. To what do we actually need and what do we already have? Gratitude is also, this is my favorite part, is can be very politically subversive, right? So many of us have been raised in a dominant Western capitalist society where we are kind of given the message or taught that in order to be happy, we need to do more. We need to buy more. We need to make more money. Even if we're trying to solve a good problem in a good way, probably you don't have already what you need to do that. You need more education. You need more something. And what the gratitude practice does is helps us counteract that. It helps us to remember what we already do have, what we are resourced by. Yeah. And what's important in order to keep going, to keep doing this work. The gratitude practice also, and I just want to say that never in any of this work are we ever going into it saying, now feel grateful right now. That's not what we do. We're creating a space where gratitude can arise. Yeah. And we do that in a lot of different ways. So then after we're resourced in gratitude, we move on to the next stage of the spiral, which is honoring our pain here. And this is, really the origin of the work when it started as despair work. And honoring our pain is a really central part of the work that reconnects. In honoring our pain, we are allowing ourselves to tell the truth about what we feel about the state of our world. And through doing this, we are remembering our belonging to the world, right? We would not grieve over something we did not care about. We would not be angry if there was not something unjust going on. So we are connecting with our functionality. It is in systems theory, for open living systems to function effectively, to evolve, they have to be able to feel, they have to be able to respond appropriately to what's going on around them. And if we are conditioned as humans to be don't be sad, don't cry, anger is not polite, all of these things, we are cutting off our capacity to respond appropriately. So we're actually restoring our wholeness and our functionality as a human being to respond to our environment. The other thing that we are doing is we are taking emotions that in many cultures live under shame. These things are shameful. They can feel shameful. They can also feel like they are gonna paralyze us. I can't get sad today because I have to take my kid to soccer practice and I have to teach a class and I have to do this. And we don't let ourselves go there because we're afraid we won't be able to carry on. And what we do in this stage of the spiral is we create a safe place where it can be shared, where it can become fuel, and where it is, instead of being shameful, it becomes dignity. I am here because I give a shit. I am upset because I care, and that demonstrates my mutual belonging to this world and my moral appropriateness. Yeah. So we're taking the emotions from shame into dignity. And we're also we're not hanging out in this place forever. This is an important part of the spiral. We're doing it together. And then once we free up this channel in ourselves, we're able to move on. So we do it together. We do it in a safe place. And then we are prepared for the next stage of the spiral, which is seeing with new eyes. And seeing with new eyes is the stage of the spiral in which, after we have accessed our gratitude and honored our pain for the world, which has shown us that actually I am much larger than I think I am. I am not just my individual ego concerned with myself. I am a bit larger than I thought I was, because I'm actually much more interconnected with the rest of the web of life, which I can feel now because I've allowed myself to feel my pain on behalf of it. So in seeing with new eyes, we get to expand on that, and we get to, I really like the stage of the spiral because we get to use our imagination a lot, and we get to access the perspective of non-human beings, of ancestors and the future generations. So we place ourselves in a much larger story, and we access the resources that are available there. Seeing with new eyes also includes something that we call deep time, which is where we start to see, because in our culture, most of us, don't want to speak for everybody, but most of us live in a world where things happen very fast, in nanoseconds. and efficiency is about getting it done quicker. And what we're doing in deep time and seeing with new eyes is we're slowing things down a little bit. We're taking a bigger perspective, and we can see ourselves then as one very small, very important, crucial part of a much larger story. So after we have seen with new eyes, and also I should say the seeing with new eyes part of the spiral is often called seeing with new or ancient eyes, because as I mentioned, a lot of this is not new to everybody in the world. There are a lot of earth-based, traditional, indigenous, sustainable cultures who operate this way, already are living this way, and we want to hear their voices and include their voices. So seeing with new or ancient eyes. And then after we've done that, we move into going forth. And going forth is the final stage of the spiral. And going forth is where we say, okay, now what? Now that we've moved through this process and we have accessed our resources and honored our pain and remembered what we care about, and seen from a new perspective, understanding ourselves and our world a little bit differently, a little bit bigger. What are we going to do next? What's the next step? And so the going forth is a very practical part of the spiral, which is, in my mind, one of the things that makes it unique to a lot of other spiritual processes that may be really beautiful, but maybe don't include this very practical step of what now? What are we going to do? What am I going to do? And what are we going to do together? So it's one benefit to working with a group over time with this work is that you really get to explore working together, which is really, really encouraging. So that's the spiral. We're going to take a break in a moment, but I want to open it up first to see if there are any questions, thoughts, reflections that you would like to share. We'll just do this for a few minutes so that we can take a break. But we'd love to hear from you. What's on your mind? Do you have any questions? What does this bring up for you? And please just speak to the heart of the matter and try to be as brief as you can in your share so that we can hear from as many people as possible. I encourage you to be brave and speak to the group. And if you are not comfortable with that, you can also put something in the chat. So the floor is open. What do you think? What do you want to know? You can raise your hand or...
Hi, my name is Ed. I'm just going to jump in. I appreciated having it laid out. I've seen the spiral and seen, like the different names, but I feel like it really helped me to hear your description of them, and it brought it more to life. And I find myself just really curious and interested in kind of diving into it and see what comes out. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
I noticed that I want to jump to the fourth step, and I need to continue to learn to slow down and really feel I can get stuck in grief, or then I go into like cortisol. I got to stay in action, and I'm kind of a stimulant junkie in a way, with the coffee, and there's got to be something I need to do, and then that could be overwhelming. And so learning how to be methodical in that spiral is sort of what I'm curious about.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, it reminds me, a lot of people have been looking at the Work That Reconnects kind of from a trauma and resilience lens. And it's really a big part of what we're doing in the work is kind of expanding our tolerance zone or a zone of comfort where we're able to touch into the things that are challenging and come out of them again. So it makes us more capable of meeting the things that we may meet in our daily lives that might be paralyzing or jack up our anxiety or all of these things. So it gives us tools to kind of to navigate better. Thanks. Sam, yep.
What came to me when you were talking about honoring our pain was that if we're if we can't make space for what we need to feel, then actually, because of a fear that it will slow us down, then actually in one level we're colluding with the culture which we want to try and dissolve. So we're colluding with the industrial growth culture, and I'm always very interested in that. It's like, where are we, what patterns that live in us and in our cultures that are keeping us bound into what it is that we actually oppose. So yeah, it was really interesting. Thank you. I'm also super interested in grief work, so thanks.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you. Yep, Sharon.
I just wanted to say, one of the things I appreciate about this is that it feels grounded in, I would use the word, it's spiritually grounded, but what I like about it most is that the language feels universally accessible. And then so it seems to me it resonates for me, and would for anyone of any religious background or cultural background, that the environmental focus gives us a commonality that many things don't. So I just appreciate that part of it. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Sharon. Yeah. And that's actually something that we're always working towards more. How do we keep growing the language to be more and more accessible and universal? So I really also welcome any feedback or thoughts about that as well, at any point. Yeah, thank you. Maybe one more if there's anybody else. Christy. Yeah.
Hi, I'm a highly sensitive person, and I've experienced a lot of grief in my life and loss. And it's really nice to know that these feelings, environmental grief and stuff that I've felt since I was little, that they not only are valid and important, an important part of this, but it's almost like they're fuel, our grief and our feelings and our anger and our sadness. It gives me hope that there's a step after, right? That there's a step after feeling the feelings, and even if you get overwhelmed, that's okay, and it's really nice and really I guess encouraging, that this sadness that we feel and share can really push us forward to action.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And you reminded me of something when you said the word hope. So is the last thing I'll say, and then we'll take a break. That another phrase you might hear a lot associated with the work that reconnects is active hope. And active hope is something that we're working to cultivate when we're doing this work. And the reason that we call it active hope is because we're using hope as a verb, rather than hope being this kind of blind faith that everything is going to get better. In active hope, it's like a 3-step process, right? So the first step is acknowledging the truth of where we are, which really happens in gratitude and honoring our pain. So we're acknowledging the truth of where we are. The second step is identifying a hoped for future, So what do we want to see? And that's important because I've learned, I believe it's true, that humans are, as far as we know, humans are the only animals that are capable of imagining something that doesn't yet exist. This is like our superpower, and it's essential if we want to create another world. But if we can't see it, we have to see it first, right? So the second step of active hope is to imagine the hoped for future. And then the third step is to take active steps in that direction. So acknowledging where we are, identifying a hoped for future, and taking active steps in that direction. So hope becomes this thing that we're actively cultivating all the time with each other. It's not just a thing that I have to cling to and hope everything's going to be okay. So I just wanted to put that out there, because you might hear active hope a lot kind of around this kind of work, and just wanted to explain that. So let's take a break. Please take 5 minutes and do whatever you need to do for yourself. pee or stretch or give somebody a hug or crazy in your journal, whatever you want to do to take care of yourself. And we'll start again at 10 past with some practices. So the next practice we're going to do is kind of a foundational practice from the Work That Reconnects, and it can be adopted and adapted in a lot of different contexts in a lot of different ways. So it's very useful. It's a very simple way of connecting and moving through the spiral, and it's called open sentences. And I'm going to tell you a bit about it, and then we're going to do it. So the way that this works is that two people are sitting together or in a breakout room together, and you take turns speaking and listening. So one person will speak for a few minutes, and the other person is just listening. There's no responding. There's no, questioning, anything like that. You're just listening, and like you're receiving a gift from this person, and breathing. Don't forget to breathe. And you're going to be sharing when you are in the speaking position. You're going to be using the beginning of a sentence to speak, and you're going to complete. Basically, we'll give you the beginning of a sentence, an open sentence, and you're going to complete that sentence over and over and over and over and over for 2 minutes or so. Now, there's a couple things I want to say about this. So when you are using the sentence, when you are completing the sentence, when you're speaking, I'm going to ask you to really try to be specific. So just as in the first exercise where we asked you to, get into the details, I'm going to ask you to do that again. So for example, I might say, the easiest example that I always use is for breakfast this morning, I had, okay, so one thing I could say is for breakfast this morning, I had food. That's true, but it's not very interesting. And it doesn't actually speak to my experience at all. So instead, I might say for breakfast this morning, I had a bowl of porridge and I cut up some dates and I grounded up some walnuts that I got from the bulk bin. And then I got some of the goat's milk that comes from my neighbor, and I heated it all up and I swished it around and I ate it really slowly, so we're getting into, and then you can kind of feel my experience, right? So that's what we're going for. We're going for details, and we're also going for feeling rather than mental activity. So rather than speaking from your mind, you're not so much telling a story from your head. I'm going to encourage you to slow down, right? Silence is okay. To lean back, maybe even close your eyes as you're speaking, and speak from a place of feeling in this moment. What am I feeling right now? So take your time with the sentence. Also, as I mentioned, you're going to come back to the sentence over and over and over throughout your 2 or so minutes of sharing. So anytime you get to the end of the thought, come back to the sentence again. Come back to the sentence again. What I ate for breakfast is not the best example for that one, but maybe something that I love about where I live is the way that the clouds roll in super fast, and it could be pouring rain one moment and then the next moment it's shining. Something I love about where I live is the dramatic cliff line and the way that the ocean crashes up against the cliffs. Something I love about where I live is, so we're coming back to the beginning of the sentence over and over and over. Anytime you get stuck, come back to the beginning of the sentence. The listener, you have basically 2 jobs. One job is to listen and breathe. Your second job is to keep an eye on any prompts coming across the screen, because we'll be sending you prompts saying first person shares now, and then you'll get a prompt that says wrap up your share. And if the speaker may have their eyes closed to help them with feeling into it, they may be gazing off into the distance. And as the listening partner, you get to support them by letting them know when the time has come to wrap up. let's get over the fact we are not interrupting each other. We're making it safe for them to relax and share because they know that you're going to let them know when the time is up. So one very easy way of doing that is just to say, thank you, we're getting a prompt to wrap up now, or however you want to say it in your own words. Yeah. Or just thank you. Thank you. So at the end of, if I'm sharing for 2 minutes, the person who's listening to me when I'm done is just going to say thank you. That's it. There's no responding. And then we'll switch. And the other person will use that same sentence for 2 minutes or so. We are going to send you the sentences as you are in the breakout room. One thing I recommend is to make it easier sometimes, because especially on Zoom, you know, the prompt comes up and I'm like, something I love about where I live is, and then I try to start talking right away, and I'm not actually very connected. So I might read the sentence first, something I love about where I live is, and then I might sit back and say it again and feel into it. Something that I love about where I live is, yeah. So take a moment with the sentence for yourself to kind of get it into your body. The last thing before I'll ask if there's any questions is that I recognize that we are going into these partner exercises where we have more experience of each other. And I recognize that we're going in now, you might very well be in a room with somebody that you've never talked to before. And so I just ask you to go in with a bit of trust, knowing that your partner and yourself might be bringing a bit of vulnerability. And so I just want to name that I recognize that we're asking a lot of trust of you now, and that you don't have to share anything you don't feel comfortable. This is your space. What is the question? You will get the questions when you're in the breakout room. So keep your eye on the screen. The first thing you do when you get into the breakout room is just decide who goes first, who wants to speak first. And then you'll just keep alternating. Altogether, there will be 4 sentences. Yeah. So any questions before we start? I don't see any hands up. Okay. Oh, I see there's one hand up.
How many minutes for each answer, dear?
It'll be about 2 minutes. We'll let you know. We'll let you know when it's time to wrap up, but it'll be about 2 minutes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Amaya, are we set? Welcome back, everybody. Waiting on a few more to come back. Okay. Welcome back. Welcome back. So we've got a few minutes now just to reflect on that experience. So again, the floor is open, and the question is, how was that for you? What did you notice? What did you feel? What did you experience? Any range, positive or challenging, anything you experienced. Just please remembering confidentiality. So please don't share anything about what your partner may have said, but speak about your own experience. So we'll just take a few minutes with this. And again, please trying to speak to the heart of the matter and be in brief with the comments so that we can hear from as many people as possible. So the floor is open. How was Rhiannon?
I was just amazed, as I have been with my little that I've done this work, every time, with the power of answering the question and starting to feel my feelings, and I don't want to, and I think it's miserable, and at first I'm full of despair, And then as soon as I start to talk about my heart and it opens up, I feel that I come alive. I feel the juice in my body. And
Gorgeous.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you. Who else wants to share? Yeah, Alyssa.
It was a very lovely experience that was both celebratory. It was celebratory ultimately, even though we started with celebration, we went to our sadness and the difficulties, but did come back to the beauty that remains in ours and a sense of celebration. So it was very pleasant and I appreciated it very much.
Thanks, Alyssa. I saw Sharon, did you have a hand up?
I did. Thanks. I was just going to say, I found it much more emotionally engaging than I expected. It felt powerful, and I felt extremely connected to the person I was talking with. So that was lovely. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sharon. Yeah. Maybe one or two more.
I also loved the emotional connection, and just I miss people so much, and I fell in love with the woman I shared with too in this sense, and she's across the world, and that I could feel like I want to reach out and hug somebody. I could feel her heartbeat, and appreciating that this format could be rewarding. And yeah, truth telling, yes. Thank you.
Any last thoughts?
I'd like to share. As the universe would have it, I got to be in a group with not only one person, but two people, and then three people. And it was incredibly powerful. And as we had more sharing, I just felt the energy amplified in the group, the emotions amplified, the space got bigger, the work went deeper, and I was reminded of why we do this in a group. You know, we can hold space for each other, for our emotions, and more can move when we have this larger group, more hearts, more space for these energies to move. It was really powerful. So thank you to my group and how it worked out that I got to share. So thank you.
Thanks, Maya. Yeah, thank you everybody for being willing to dive right in. And we're gonna do a little bit of writing now. So I'm gonna move us along. So if you don't have something to write with, go ahead and grab that. And as you're doing that, I'll just say, just for your reference, you may have noticed the kind of spiral of the questions or the open sentences we went through. The first started in gratitude, and the second two were really honoring our pain. And the third one actually kind of lives in seeing with new eyes as we start to look at what we appreciate about this moment as compared to, in the larger span of things. So this next practice that we're going to do is something called Corbett, named after the town where it originated. I think it's in Indiana or somewhere like that. And often it's done in groups of 4, but we're going to do it now as a writing exercise. And this Corbett kind of lives in going forth, but it can move through the whole spiral. So kind of seeing with new eyes, going forth, just so you know, and let you have your own experience of it now. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to take a moment. If you would like to close your eyes, you can, or find a place to rest your gaze, soften the gaze. And just feeling into everything that we've covered today, what you love about being alive on Earth and the pain that we feel for the world, and everything that you know already about yourself and your world and your life and your communities. I'd like you to consider this sentence. One action I would like to take to act on behalf of life is. We'll pop that in the chat and you can take your pen to paper as you're ready. One action I'd like to take to act on behalf of life is. You don't have to have it perfect, just a place to start. One action I'd like to take to act on behalf of life is. Just take another 20 seconds or so. And then wrapping up that thought, and then I'm going to ask you to come back to yourself for a moment. Before we do any sharing, we're going to do a few more processes here. So just go ahead and again, if it's comfortable, close your eyes or soften the gaze, rest your gaze on something calming. And for a moment, I'm going to ask you, in your imagination, your child's mind, I'm going to ask you to identify with an ancestor. It does not have to be a biological ancestor, but somebody who has walked this earth before you. Could have been 100 years ago or thousands of years ago. You don't have to know who they are. I'm only asking you to imagine that you can become a human being who has lived in times past. See if you can feel into that. And as this ancestor, you get to behold the human being in front of you who has just set an intention, one way that they would like to act on behalf of life. As someone who has walked this earth before, what do you want to say to that person? What words of support or perspective or encouragement? What do you want them to know? Now you can take your pen to paper as an ancestor and write to them. It'll take about 3 minutes. I'm going to put on some music. And starting to wrap up your thoughts. And then coming back to yourself. And go ahead and take a moment to thank this ancestor and bid them farewell. Maybe even take a little shake, shake, shimmy, give the legs a squeeze. Come back to this moment. We're gonna take one more journey now from this moment. Going to invite you to travel forward to see if you can identify with a human being 200 years in the future. Close your eyes if that feels okay, or just lower your gaze. Again, you don't have to know who they are or what their circumstances are. Just imagine that you can, for a moment, step into the body of a future human being, 200 years down the road, where life has sustained itself. And as this human being in the year 2221, you get to look back at the human who is right smack in the middle of the great turning, who has also just set an intention for one way they'd like to act on behalf of life. And from this place where you are 200 years in the future, what would you like to say to that human who's in the middle of the great turning? What do you want them to know? What do you want to say to them as they work to act on behalf of life? And as that future human, you can write to them now. Starting to wrap up your thoughts. And coming back to yourself again. Thanking and bidding farewell to this future human who has lent their perspective. And coming back again to this present moment, to your own body, maybe giving the arms or the legs a squeeze. Looking around the room, seeing where you are. And then looking one more time at the perspectives you've just been given. And as yourself sitting here right now in this moment, just take a few moments to see if there's anything you'd like to say to yourself now about your intention or otherwise. You can write that down. And bringing those thoughts to a close. And coming back as you're ready to each other, the group, our little crew that's been on this journey together today. Before we wrap up, I just want to open the floor for a few moments to see if anybody would like to share any reflections on that process. Yeah, anything you'd like to share, how that was, anything you discovered or you felt.
I'll
The floor
share.
is open. We'll just take about 2 or 3 minutes. So,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kimberly. I especially liked the question about the future human in 200 years. I think it was maybe something that was missing from my equation was the idea that like there will be people after me. I don't know why it hadn't occurred to me, but when I expressed my intention to this future human, there was this like almost like a nudging towards like your intention kind of has a bit of apathy to it. Like, what if it could be a little bigger, a little bit more connected to the community versus just something for yourself as an individual? So that's what ended up coming up for me was was what the future human said. See yourself as part of a thriving collective. It may not be natural to your programming, but it is a more healthier way to see yourself as part of the human family. So that was fun. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kimberly. Thanks for sharing. Lovely. Sarah.
The thing that resonated for me was the thinking about the ancestor, and the thought that came to mind that I hadn't had yet was what would the meaning of life be in a different world? You know, like back before the Industrial Revolution and back before so much progress and technology, you know, if success and progress isn't the goal, like what's the goal? And it just kind of has me recontextualizing who I want to be and how I want to go forward with, you know, the meaning of life isn't money and a house and a Lamborghini, you know, and, you know, when those things aren't even on the table, when those things aren't even in your in your worldview as an option, like what really has meaning, what's the point of being here and being human? And, I don't know, I haven't figured that out yet, but it just, it kind of was a light bulb moment for me.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Maybe one more, if anybody wants to share.
I have a song I could leave you with. It's short.
Sure.
Okay. And it goes with the ancestors. So it's my prayer for the world for years. So listen for the ancient songs whispered through our dreams. We all walk along humming a tune. We seek harmony. You might be alone or you might be with friends. Sometimes we miss the beat, but if we listen, there's a silent pause, weaving a melody. Oh, if we listen, there's a silent pause, weaving a melody.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Robin. Silent pause. Oh, that feels like a fitting conclusion. Thank you. Yeah, I want to say a big thank you to all of you, and I will stick around for a few minutes after we close if anybody wants to chat or share more or ask any questions, but I want to close us on time. So I just want to, I feel like I've just been, I love and struggle with these because I feel like I've just met you all and I just don't want to say goodbye so soon. But I first of all, I am very open and encouraging of feedback. It's how systems evolve. So I want to participate in that. And I really am really happy and open to being in touch. So I'm just going to pop my email address into the chat here and really welcome your communication, whether you'd like to give some feedback on the workshop or otherwise. And I want to tell you that we have been running a 3-month, an international online group for the past 1.5 years since the pandemic began. And it's 3 months long and it's a closed group. So you join for the whole 3 months and it's the same group that travels together. We meet every 2 weeks and we're starting a new round on September 21st. And it's run on the gift economy. And I'm going to give you the link to that right now in case you'd like to check it out. We start September 21st. We usually have between 30 and 40 people, 30, 35 from all over the world. We've had like 15, 16 countries represented so far, 4 or 5 different continents. It's a really, you can maybe you can see that we've literally just touched the toppest tip of the iceberg here today. So it's a really sweet opportunity to dive into the work a bit deeper and to connect in a really real way with people from all over the world. The group meets on Tuesdays. It's 6 p.m. Irish time. That's 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And the other thing that this group offers is our optional study action groups. And the study groups, as I said, are optional, which means you don't have to join them. But for people because some people come to the group because they really need a place to process emotions. Some people come to the group because they're really hungry to take action. And for those people who are really hungry to take action in their own communities, we offer the study action groups, which is where you and 2 or 3 other people from the group who are more local to each other get to meet outside of the large group. once in between every large group session for an hour, and you're given a process from the Work That Reconnects to basically move through and to support each other in taking action in your own communities. And I can say more about that afterwards if you have questions, but it's a really great way of actually, it's basically an expansion on the going forth part of the spiral is what the study action groups are for. Amaya, do you want to say anything about the groups or about anything else?
Yeah, did you mention that the study action groups also sort of rotate roles? So you get to practice your facilitation skills, your note-keeping skills, your time-keeping skills. And yeah, step more into a leadership role, which is really great. It's like you really start to own the material. It's empowering. The study action groups are very empowering.
Yeah, that's true. And you're given a format, so you get to kind of, you don't have to invent it, but you're given a format that you can use on your own. Yeah, it's a really great way to experience the work in a more intimate setting too, and to go a bit deeper into it. So anyway, that group, I would love to see some of you there. And we also really welcome, even if you're not interested in going forward with the group, we are always really grateful and welcoming of any scholarship support, because we do offer scholarships, you know, to people who are under-resourced. And those scholarships are made possible by people who are more well-resourced and are willing to give to that. So yeah, and along those lines, I want to say thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to give you a link, and one more link, which this is the link that you can use if you feel like supporting scholarships. This is also a link here that I just put in the chat that you can use if you feel inclined to make a donation for this workshop today that we've just had. It's offered freely, so there is no expectation of donations, but if you're someone who's well-resourced who feels like they'd like to support, any donations will go to myself and Amaya for facilitation and for further scholarships for people who can't afford to be here in the future. So thank you for anything that you are able to give. And again, it is not expected at all. So I think that's all I have left to say. Maybe one more thing is that if you want to find out more about the work, you can always go to workthatreconnects.org, which is the home of the Work That Reconnects network. And you can find all kinds of resources and groups and information there. So that's it for me. I want to say a huge thank you to Amaya. As usual, I could not do it without you on so many levels. And thank you so much to all of you for being here. And I'll stick around, so feel free to stay on and chat or ask questions. But for now, maybe we can all unmute ourselves and say goodbye, and please be in touch.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.